Rejoice, the Lord has risen and her name is Sonic Mania. Mania is the light to clear away the darkness and cast a new shining beam upon the franchise. Remember Sonic had a shaky start in 3D? Haha, what great original remarks. Welcome to just about every intro whenever Sonic Mania is brought up. Still, it is true, Sega has had quite the hard time trying to revitalize universal passion for the blue blur because of some questionable decisions along the way. Let's face it, while Sonic games aren't the scorn of the industry, the franchise has a stained reputation. It's become a popular thing to bash the poor creature and the culture surrounding it, which admittedly is very, very bizarre sometimes. Although cliche, it's important to acknowledge this damaged history to show just how far Sonic has come and how much the Hedgehog has improved with Sonic Mania. Let me cut to the chase. Mania is a godsend of a game. 2017 has been such a great year for games, and I'm happy to say that Mania is among one of the best. What's even more impressive is that this game wasn't even made by Sonic Team themselves. Mania was produced by fans who had previously worked passionately on fan games out of love for Sonic the Hedgehog, specifically being the same group of people that ported the original Sonic games to iOS and Android a few years back. Sonic Mania was a project made out of love for the series, and it shows. Sega deserves serious props for giving these people a chance to work with them, and the team deserves even more props for excelling at the chance Sega gave them. Before we delve into this video, if you haven't played Mania for yourself, I'd highly suggest you do so. For one thing, it's only $20 on PS4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and PC soon, which is a steal as far as I'm concerned with the amount of content given for that price. Secondly, I'll be covering some zones not shown by promotional material, so some of that initial surprise of returning or new zones, returning or new set pieces and characters, and all the other quirks that come with Mania might be lost as a result. Spoilers don't ruin games for me, but they might ruin the experience for you, and I certainly don't want that on my hands. So yeah, anyways, Sonicania, like the classics Sonic 3, Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and Sonic CD, is a game that puts the gameplay first. There's no cutscenes here, no spiky-haired boys running around in a street for God knows how long. There's none of that. The actual plot can be pieced together with the very short, minimalistic, no dialogue scenes, but if you want to be engrossed in the lore of Sonic Mania, you'll have to look to the manual for help. Unfortunately, I didn't get the collector's edition that the manual came with, so I'll be going off of secondhand accounts for the lore. Mania's narrative essentially boils down to Sonic and Tails detecting this odd energy source somewhere on Angel Island, and the two take off in the tornado to try to find out what it is. However, before the duo can even find out what the source is, they're intercepted by Dr. Eggman's new breed of robots dubbed hard-boiled heavies. Whatever this energy source is remains unknown, and I just know we're going to see countless Sonic theories on the horizon about what this thing is and how it could tie into Sonic Forces or whatever. Game hypothesis: does Sonic Mania tie in with Sonic Forces? Click here for more insightful insight! All you need to know about this gem is that it transports the gang to various locations around the universe, world, or timelines, and it's just a way for you to have a simple objective. You have to stop Dr. Eggman and the hard-boiled heavies from using the power for evil. What's more interesting, though, is that the hard-boiled heavies eventually become sentient and rebel against Eggman, trying to use the power for themselves. So in the end, it's Eggman versus you and the heavies versus you and Eggman, and you versus the heavies and Eggman. It's like a big love triangle. This could make for a good fanfic. Regardless, this is a sort of cliche. Robots turning against their masters is nothing new, but still, it's done in such a light-hearted and goofy manner, I don't even care. I love Eggman's facial expressions when he's fighting over control of the gem. It's brilliant. For a game that's entirely sprite-based, the characters have a lot of charm and depth. Facial expressions are well detailed, enemy designs are perfectly crafted and unique. The hard-boiled heavies specifically are styled after the good doctor himself, but they're quite a bit more menacing with their various getups and robotic exteriors. I just sort of picture Eggman designing these robots and trying to make them in his image, but they end up being more frightening and better than him as a result. God, I just love these enemies. Also, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles have never looked better in sprite form. They're stylized with a greater range of colors than their Genesis counterparts, allowing their models to pop out of the environment. Unlike the classic titles, the three amigos have this cool animation when they go really fast that shows their legs in a vortex of sorts. It's like a hyper-extension of Sonic's circular running legs, and it's pretty neat. Also, when Knuckles glides, he has this animation where, upon touching the ground, his body smushes along the floor and slides. Every aspect of Sonic Mania's animations had some real care and thought put into them to make them as cartoonish and bouncy as possible. It works tremendously well given how carefree the game presents itself as. Nowhere is this more true than in the soundtrack, and just... holy fuck, Sonic Mania's OST is the gift that keeps giving. Every track is filled to the brim with jamming melodies that get stuck in your head. No song is dull or just there for some background noise. No, Sonic Mania's music is part of the game's soul to the fullest extent. Most tracks are upbeat bangers to encapsulate the fast-paced Sonic's gameplay is known for. Take Studiopolis Zone Act 2's track as an example. It serves as a leitmotif of the previous act, but this time around the tempo is faster and the percussion and keyboard are heavier. You also have this sort of brass-sounding lick in the background that keeps the momentum of the track going. It's sublime, and listening to it in-game just makes you appreciate the tremendous quality of it that much more. Then there's High Spec Robo Go, a track that features this absolutely killer saxophone part, as well as some awesomely distorted licks that tie in the saxophone part to the main beat. It's fast-paced and perfectly reflects the boss fight the track sounds off in. You're on a predetermined track trying to dodge missiles while fighting these menacing robots. The music gives you this sense of urgency and forward momentum. I have to mention the percussion in the background that only serves to further the tempo and make High Spec Robo Go that much more spectacular. Oh, and how could I forget about the track that plays during Stardust Speedway Zone Act 2? Much like the tracks that play in the nostalgic retro zones, this track takes elements from the past and ties them in with bits from the present. For those who have played Sonic D, you'll remember that Stardust Speedway had two variations for the musical tunes, depending on whether or not you were playing the Good Future or Bad Future version. The track for Mania takes both elements and creates a wonderful symbiotic relationship of smooth funkiness. It's not as upbeat as the boss track that comes after, Something Else I'm in Love With, but it's so chill and still has the qualities of making you want to continue to go along the zone with speed. And then there's, well, all the other tracks. I could easily spend an entire video discussing Sonic Mania's genius musical compositions because I don't think there's a single track here I didn't enjoy. I loved all the remixes of past tracks too because the composer knew how to make it distinct from the original with a bunch of new parts while still sounding somewhat familiar. Listen to Mania's soundtrack when you get the chance. I'd be honestly surprised if no songs resonated with you because they're all jazzy, funky, smooth, and just so good. And I'd be crazy not to mention the visuals while I'm at it, which just ooze creativity and passion. It's so potently nostalgic. I'd recommend only one a day so you don't get OS over Sonic. Every stage is beautifully crafted from a graphical standpoint. Sprite work is clean and old stages have been treated to a new, cozy slosh of paint. The new stages are likewise wonderfully designed with a bunch of cool, interesting set pieces so that each stage continues feeling visually varying. While the gameplay also accomplishes this, it's nice to have an assortment of stages and acts that all do something visually to stand out from the others. Like in Oil Ocean Zone Act 1, it's a casual run through an oil rig rigged with death traps, while the second act uses the same idea of a deadly oil rig, but adds in this element that the whole place is collapsing and leaking some harmful gas. These visuals spice up the gameplay so there's never a dull moment with Mania. I just love how vibrant the entire game is from start to finish. This is a game that's not afraid to be creative and actually use a myriad of colors. It's so refreshing to see a game that has so much work put into it to be so visually pleasing. All in all, Sonic Mania's presentation is something to behold. Okay, enough gushing around. I'm the most negative guy on the planet. What do you say we crank up the negativity machine to 11 for the next part, the gameplay, which is great. And you thought, you probably didn't. Sonic Mania really broke my sense of negativity, I guess, because this game plays like the love child of classic Sonic in 2017, in the sense that the gameplay is really fucking good and tight in my opinion. Though, of course, no game is perfect, and Sonic Mania is no exception. It has its positives and its negatives, but what is this classic Sonic I speak of? Well, it refers to Sonic's roots as a 2D platforming mascot and how we can move fairly quickly, make a sound when he jumps, spin dash by crouching and pressing a button, picking up power shields that give him extra abilities, and well, that's pretty much it. Go watch this video I made about classic Sonic if you want. Point is, the gameplay of Sonic Mania is fairly simple. You go left while avoiding deadly hazards. But it's in this simplicity that Sonic really shines. With how easy it is to pick up and play Mania, it's that much more enthralling when you really get into it. This game will kick your ass, and I love that it's so challenging and relentless. The action and thrill of platforming never lets up, causing you to always be engaged with the gameplay. You're always on edge when making moves around the level so you don't die from an enemy's projectile or the stupid moving blocks and chemical plant zone. Despite this, every zone back-to-back is a blast and kept me smiling through my frustration of dying over and over and over and over and over again. I sucked at Sonic Mania on my first playthrough, but that didn't mean I was turned off by it. I wanted to get better and conquer all the zones. I wanted to get all the Chaos Emeralds to unlock Super Sonic. I wanted to try out all the stages with all the characters. I was having fun for almost the entire time, which is a huge compliment to Mania's good level design. Sonic Mania starts out strong with Green Hill Zone, the iconic setting from Sonic 1 that's used as the intro stage to just about every classic Sonic story to date. Some might say Mania's inclusion of Green Hill Zone is a bit cliche or even tiresome, but I wouldn't necessarily agree. See, the point of Mania is not really to innovate on every little bit of classic Sonic. It sets out to celebrate and glorify the past. Mania wants you to fondly remember the retro zones it uses. For that reason, I wouldn't say it's nostalgia pandering or only exists for people to clap when they see something they know. Sure, the music of Green Hill Zone might get a little old when you hear it a dozen times in Act 1, but that's the case with anything being overexposed. Plus, Act 2 is a remix of the classic Green Hill Zone theme, and it's catchy, upbeat, and sounds stellar. Would I have preferred Sonic Mania begin with another stage rather than the same first stage every classic Sonic Redux story begins with? Yeah, obviously, anything to spice up things for the player. What if the act was somewhat of a fake out and Green Hill Zone became corrupted and wasn't the Green Hill Zone we all were so used to as you explored deeper into the stage? Regardless, Mania's take on Green Hill Zone is a pretty standard and good way to start out your experience with the game. New elements are scattered across Act 1 and 2 to make things distinct from a gameplay level, whether that be the abundance of shields, these zip lines, or spiky bridges that rotate on screen. Both acts also feel substantially larger and more non-linear than they have in previous games, with numerous alternate paths you can take to reach the end. That's a consistent theme with most of Mania's levels. They can be completed in different ways. Not only does this make repeat playthroughs more interesting and exploration rewarding when you find an out-of-place shield or special ring, but it also makes returning to stages after inevitable game overs and deaths less frustrating. Since there are new elements of the stage you might have missed, you can search for these alternative routes and secrets. It gives you an added incentive to keep playing and not to get upset by whatever just killed you. You're too distracted by the other new parts of the stage to let this anger set in, because by the time you get back to whatever caused your death, you're able to overcome the obstacle. Lives are not easy to come by, so if you're a newcomer to classic Sonic, be prepared to have game overs quite a bit. While I would have preferred a system that doesn't punish players so harshly that it sends them all the way back to Act 1 if they lose all their measly lives, especially with the final act, it wasn't enough to make me not enjoy Mania. I was very frustrated by some bullshit killing me every now and again, some garbage that would appear from off screen when I was going too fast or rushing through the stage. I can understand why people would think this is a bad design choice, as Sonic goes too fast sometimes to react to hazards that come out of nowhere. It goes back to Sonic's speedy nature not always being complemented by the location of these obstacles. However, this was obviously an intentional design decision, and for me, it never got to the point where it ruined my experience. You have to take your time to learn these levels through trial and error while still using Sonic's speed to maneuver around. The best part about this is that levels are usually short and you learn the level more by dying and trying again. You feel a real sense of satisfaction when you conquer conquer that stage that's been giving you trouble over and over. This happened to me with Oil Ocean Zone. I swear I had to retry that stage about a dozen times, because I would end up coming to the final boss with 1 life and die as a result of my incompetence. Over time, I learned Act 1 and 2 so perfectly that I was able to ace it without losing a single life, and when I finally conquered that dumb squid thing, I felt so accomplished. I faced a genuine challenging hurdle, and I overcame it through sheer determination and willpower. The feeling I got afterward made all that struggling and grunting worth it. It's such a fucking adrenaline rush. Of course, this difficulty is entirely subjective. Something I may find challenging and frustrating, you might find easy, and you might even be inclined to say that I suck at Sonic, which would be fair, but that's besides the point. I love when games kick my ass and let me know I'm the only one who could have stopped it. Sonic Mania is truly the Dark Souls of... With every passing act, you face a bunch of bosses, old and new, in Sonic Mania's 12 stages. These are among the weakest parts of the entire experience, unfortunately. Some bosses, like Oil Ocean Zone Act 1's Robot Repairman, are utterly stupid. This guy makes these green platforms rocket up to spikes, and if you're just entering the fight for the first time, the game gives you almost no indication the spikes are up there. You wouldn't even think to look up because you're too concentrated on wailing on the boss, so when the platforms do rise up quickly, you'll be faced with almost certain death as you get squished between spikes and other platforms. Luckily, this boss doesn't take many hits, so it's not the worst design in the world, but this boss is a stain on an otherwise fun act. Then there's the issue that the bosses can be easily defeated by hitting them over and over with little consequence or challenge. Especially with Tails as your partner, you can take down most bosses by tanking their hits until they die fairly quickly. I know Sonic is all about speed, so I suppose in some sense this isn't such a bad thing. If you have enough rings gathered through your skills in the previous level, you should be able to have the choice to brute force your way through the boss. You can't do this with all bosses, but I don't know. I wish there could have been some alternative solution where boss battles are a bit more unique than waiting for them to attack, dodging, and then getting a few hits in. On the flip side, the Metal Sonic boss fight, as initially challenging as it might be, is an excellent example of how to innovate a classic Sonic boss battle. The sequence kicks off with Metal Sonic chasing you down and doing a variety of attacks that you have to avoid lest you lose your rings and make the rest of the battle a living nightmare. In addition, this harkens back to the rad boss fight with Metal Sonic in CD and Generations, sprinkling in that much appreciated nostalgia. After you escape this chase, Metal Sonic morphs into this gigantic robot that spits out silver robotic Sonics that you have to aim towards Metal Sonic to damage the beast. This is another wonderful aspect of Sonic Mania's design philosophy. I had to figure out the best way to put down Metal Sonic in this fight. I didn't know what to do at first, but at one point I spin dashed at the robot and it went flying into Metal Sonic's smug face to damage him. There's no Omo Chow telling you to aim for his head or anything like that, which makes defeating this monster that much more satisfying. You think it's over after much trial and error, as well as one bit where you're not really sure what killed you, but then you have to race against Metal Sonic again, and this time you can damage him as you race. This is a phenomenal change of pace from the methodical way you just took down Metal Sonic's metal robot, and it's really fun and challenging. You get so nervous when you're down to your last rings and you know that the fight is almost over, making you that much more careful and the situation that much more tense. Defeating Metal Sonic is such a relief and one of Mania's best. Now, to give credit where credit is due, I really enjoy how some of these boss fights are surprising and catch you off guard. Like at the end of Green Hill Zone, where you have to fight the final boss of Sonic 2 and are able to beat him with ease. That's really neat, and so is the boss fight at the end of Chemical Plant Zone. That's not really a boss fight. You actually play Puyo Puyo, I hope I'm saying that right, Tetris with Eggman. Upon seeing this, I was amazed at the curveball the developers just threw, and I loved it. I already enjoy Puyo Puyo, I think. So being able to face off against Eggman playing it in an actual Sonic game was astoundingly great. Even though most bosses are inadequate, these are the ones I got a kick out of, and they were quite memorable. Furthermore, this wasn't a hugely detrimental issue because the stages of Sonic Mania are the real hedgehog meat of the gameplay. And I really did love every single one of the stages, despite some poor design decisions like in Chemical Plant Zone, some unavoidable crushing blocks and metallic madness, and how challenging and long Titanic Monarch Zone is. My favorite stage has to be Studiopolis Zone by far. I really dig the musical city setting along with its jazzy, catchy tune playing in the background. Elements in this stage, like the car that beams you to places, these balls that are attached to flexible poles, and breakable mirrors are all great. This stage, both acts included, is a blast to play through, especially when you learn the best possible ways to reach the end post. This is one of 4 new zones in Sonic Mania, the others being Press Garden Zone, Titanic Monarch Zone, and Mirage Saloon Zone, which means that out of 12 stages in Mania, only 25% of them are not based off of retro courses. That's not to say this is a bad thing though, because the retro courses have been redesigned in a way to complement Mania's control style and new 16:9 aspect ratio. Stages like Lava Reef Zone and Hydrocity Zone, especially with their Act 2s, feel very different to play around in. They would be almost completely unrecognizable if they weren't made with the same style and set pieces of the levels in the past. Did I want more from Mania in terms of how many stages there are? Of course I did. I didn't want this experience to stop because I was having so much fun. I would have loved to see a bunch of new zones and whatnot. I honestly wouldn't be opposed to paying for DLC to unlock more levels since the 12 Mania boasts are all pretty great. My playthroughs ranged from 3.5 to 5 hours each, so for 20 bucks, I'd say that was worth the price of admission regardless. Mania does not lack content, but I'd love to see what else the developers can do with the Sonic material they're working with. On the topic of content, Mania sure has a lot of it for a $20 game. There's so much to do even after one playthrough. For one thing, you can work on getting the true ending by collecting all the Chaos Emeralds through the special stages. Instead of being in a pinball thing or being in some weird pipe rail, the special stages of Mania involve you taking control of Sonic and using balls and rings to try to speed your way to the emerald. As expected, with each emerald collected, the stages get that much more challenging. At first, I thought the 3D controls were a bit awkward, but after some time I got the hang of it and collected all the emeralds, unlocking Supersonic and the true final ending. These are easily my favorite special stages Classic Sonic has ever displayed. I didn't care for the others that came before it, but something about these are just so exhilarating and entertaining. It never feels like you're being restricted by forward momentum as is usually the case with Classic Sonic special stages, but you actually feel in control, which I liked. The music too sort of ties everything into this enjoyable aesthetic. Other than collecting the emeralds, you have the ability to play through the game with a variety of modes and unlockables. The latter doesn't seem to work right now. I think there's a bug that will probably be patched out by the time this video goes live, I'm sure, but the other modes are a great incentive to keep reeling you back into Mania after your first run. Much like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, you have the choice to play as Sonic, Sonic and Tails, Tails, Knuckles, and whoever else with Knuckles. All of these playstyles offer an interesting take on the established level design and serve to diversify the gameplay with each character being different from the other. You know the shtick. Knuckles climbs up walls and glides while Tails hovers. Each is just as fun as they were in the past, and they've all been beautifully animated and designed. I like how the intro to the game is a bit different depending on the character you choose as well. It's cool to see such attention to detail with Sonic flying Tails to confront the hard-boiled heavies in the beginning of the game, instead of Tails flying Sonic, and Knuckles is just chilling out at the beginning. It's pretty neat. Sonic Mania as a whole is just the embodiment of creativity and attention to detail. Is it the best Sonic game in years? Without a doubt, Mania puts Boom, Sonic 4, and 06 to shame with how great it is. And keep in mind, this was developed by a team of fans and not Sonic Team themselves. Mania is constantly challenging and has so much variety in terms of its visual presentation, sound design, and gameplay. I enjoyed every every bit of this game, even despite some frustrating design choices, weak bosses, and the fact that there aren't many new original stages. I was able to look past these gripes because of the smile I had on my face throughout my Sonic Mania playtime. Play this game right now. It's worth the price of $20 to play one of the best games of the year and easily one of the best Sonic games. If you're not into Sonic, I'd recommend you start here for your journey. And even if you don't like classic Sonic, I'd still recommend giving Mania a try. This takes the style of classic Sonic and streamlines it for the modern age in the best possible way. It'll kick your ass, so will you die. But if you're willing to put up with this difficulty, you'll find that Sonic Mania is one of the most entertaining 2D platformers in a long while. It's a blast from start to finish. Show Sega we want more of these passionate projects because it seems that the high review scores are already making them listen. If any of the team is listening, you all did a stellar job and all deserve the money I hope this game racks in. This goes without saying, but don't wait for a price drop or sale. Anyways, if you disagree or agree with me, let me know in the comment section below. As always, thank you so much for watching and take care. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.